So this is your final exam study guide. So just will review some of the basics that you need to know to do well on the final exam multiple choice question section. You will also be having an impromptu essay on the final exam. Impromptu means that you do not know what the prompt will be, what the question you will have to answer will be on that exam. So it is a way of testing your ability to think on your feet and put your thoughts clearly in writing, which is something you'll have to do in a professional setting time and again, and an academic setting as well when you have essay tests and things of that nature in the future. So the basics that you need to know for answering your multiple choice questions correctly are about essay writing, general qualities, general elements, starting with how to set up an essay in MLA format. You need to know that the font is Times New Roman, the font size is 12 point. You should use double spacing throughout the essay with no extra spaces, no extra line spaces anywhere. Your heading should have your name, your instructor's name, the class, and the date. Your header is where you put your last name and page number. So there's a difference between heading, ING, and header with an ER, and that can be confusing. So read those questions carefully. Know that your title should be centered. Know the capitalization rules for titles. Know what makes an effective title. So your comparison essay should not be titled Comparison Essay. Your literary analysis should not be just literary analysis of the Odyssey or whatever you're analyzing. Your literary analysis essay should not simply be the title of the work you're analyzing. Know what is considered too informal for academic writing, like contractions, colloquialisms, slang, unnecessary or trite words or phrases, which could be words like in conclusion, at your conclusion. That's unnecessary, an unnecessary phrase. Or as I have just said, that would be an unnecessary phrase because I would have already read what you just said, or your reader will have. Abbreviations should be avoided in academic writing. You should use third-person pronouns. First-person pronouns are appropriate for narrative essays, which we wrote a narrative essay in our class. But for the most part in academic writing, you want to stick with third-person pronouns. You need to be familiar with those. Look that up if you need a refresher. Know the rules for formatting an outline. I've had students ask me if there's a difference between a draft and an outline. And there is. A draft, when we use the term draft, we're asking for something that looks like the finished essay. So if you had to write your finished essay today, what would it look like? And it would not look like an outline. An outline has sections to help you organize your thoughts. Your big sections are the Roman numerals. Beneath the Roman numerals, you will also have letters to indicate the supporting points for the bigger sections. So one important thing to remember about outlining is if you have one supporting point or section that you also have another one. So something that is equally weighted. For example, if you have a Roman numeral 1 and underneath that you have an A, you should also have a B. So we can see that you are going to have more than one supporting detail, example, whatever within that section. It's basically indicative of the sentences within that paragraph. I think of the Roman numerals as being the main idea of the paragraph, and then the A, B, and C, and so forth being the content of the sentences. Know what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. One way to avoid plagiarism is to attribute the words you are using from your sources to the sources using in-text citations, which means you will have quotation marks around the words of the source. You will have a signal phrase that introduces the quotation and attributes that idea to the source. You will use a parenthetical citation. The parenthetical citation will take me directly to the works cited page, and that source I should be able to find from what you have put in the parenthetical citation. So the works cited page will be the last page of your essay. Using your own words in your writing is the focus. Your thinking, your ideas that you use are supported by the ideas of your sources. So your sources should not take up more space in your essay than your own writing. So you should keep your quotations from other sources below 30%. Some instructors even say below 20% of your writing, which means for every 2 sentences you quote from a source, you should have 8 of your own sentences. Know the major attributes of a thesis statement. A thesis statement should be arguable, so it should be debatable. You shouldn't just state a fact that no one could disagree with. Otherwise, why are they reading the essay? It should be the big idea of the essay, and it should be written as one complete sentence, not a fragment. It shouldn't be a whole bunch of sentences. Sometimes you can have 2 sentences to create your thesis, but generally when someone is asking for a thesis statement, they mean one complete sentence that presents an arguable point that you are going to defend in your essay. And that goes at the end of the introduction of the essay. Know what makes a good thesis statement for the different types of essays. So for a comparison essay, if you're strictly comparing, you're looking for similarities. If you're strictly contrasting, you're looking for differences. You may have an essay where you can compare and contrast, which would mean that you would need a thesis statement that tells the reader you are going to do both. You're going to be looking at similarities and differences and why those are significant to the point you are making. For a good argumentative essay, and again, all thesis statements are arguable, but when you are using an argument to persuade someone to think a certain way or do a certain thing based on a belief that you are defending, then you're going to have words like better or best or should or must oftentimes in your argumentative thesis statement. For our narrative essay, the thesis statement was the part where you explained that you learned an important lesson from an experience you wrote about. For the literary analysis thesis, you were to use some literary elements to defend or support your interpretation of a text, your interpretation of a work of literature based on a certain viewpoint that you were putting on the literary elements as those literary elements support the theme that you got out of that story or poem based on your lens, your interpretation, your viewpoint. Know the aspects of a good introductory paragraph. Introduction, start general and go to specific. You start with a hook to engage your reader, make them want to continue reading. Then you go to the background and context to prepare the reader for the thesis that goes at the end of the introductory paragraph. A conclusion is like an upside-down introduction. It starts with the thesis stated in a new way, not the exact same words that you used, maybe similar words, but not the exact sentence you used in the introductory paragraph for your thesis. Then you'll review the high points of the essay in the conclusion, and you will finally end with the big so what. How does this matter to the reader? How might what they have read in your essay apply to similar situations they may experience, whether those are similar situations that you have argued about in an argumentation essay, similar situations they may experience that you described in your narrative essay, or in a literary analysis, how might what you have analyzed and shown to be true in your essay, how might that apply to the next work of literature your reader will experience or read? Know the characteristics of a works cited page. For example, works cited sources should be in alphabetical order. You should use a hanging indent. You should capitalize and center the title works cited, and the works cited page should be the last page of your essay. You should also know what kinds of sources are considered scholarly. Scholarly sources are often found through Alabama Virtual Library. You will want to use sources that are relevant and commensurate with your time of study. So if you are in college, you should use college level sources. You can also find scholarly sources by using the internet, using sources or websites that end in .edu. Those are educational sources. Those are published by institutions of education and are considered scholarly. .gov, those are publications from our government. So we hope that those are scholarly and peer-reviewed and use experts to convey that information. But sources that end in .com are not considered scholarly for the most part. Those are the ones that you need to have okayed by your instructor if you want to use those. .com means commercial. That means they're trying to sell you something. So the major point of the information you get on those sources is to sell you a product. So be aware of that when you take the final exam. Scholarly sources primarily are going to come from Alabama Virtual Library for us. Or you can use websites like Google Scholar, which will take you to .edu or .gov websites that pertain to your field of study.